I once found myself in a place of suffocating uncertainty, convinced that each desperate breath might be my last. I'd hurried to a hospital after a sudden, terrifying allergic reaction. The strange part, I had actually worked at that same facility in the past, so I recognized the faces behind the intake desk. But my arrival was anything but reassuring. My lungs were closing, and all I could manage was a raspy whisper, enough to gasp out that I'd already used an epinephrine auto-injector. Yet, the nurse who welcomed me seemed perplexed as to why I even bothered coming, given that I had administered emergency medication on my own. "Shouldn't you be fine now?" she seemed to imply, leaving me deeply uneasy about the care I was about to receive. In that moment, I felt alone. Then came the unnerving news. No bed was immediately available. Instead, I was to be placed in a wheelchair and escorted down a dim corridor that led to a restroom and the on-call doctor's sleeping area. My body was in crisis, my heart racing, my throat constricting, and I sat there, hunched and practically invisible to the rest of the bustling ward. Time was not on my side. My first epinephrine dose was wearing off, so I used my second pen. Relief arrived, but only fleetingly. Soon my breathing became high-pitched, an unmistakable alarm known as stridor, a squeaky rattle that signals major trouble ahead. Thankfully, an alert physician overheard that ominous sound and sprang into action, rushing over to wheel me to a proper room. Now, the medical staff scrambled to find a viable vein, but anaphylaxis had rendered my circulatory system uncooperative. Needles missed their mark. Faster options like injections of Benadryl, steroids, and more epinephrine were given, but I was in a downward spiral. My husband arrived, horrified by the sight of me wide-eyed, tears streaming, my body convulsing to pull in air. He pleaded with the doctor, "We're running out of time." Although I recall hearing a reassuring murmur, something like, "We've got this under control." The world around me stretched into a tunnel of distant echoes. The edges of existence began to collapse, and that was it. My consciousness severed from my body. Yet the story was far from over. Suddenly, I became an observer drifting above, bewildered by the lifeless form on the bed. I remember thinking, that poor soul looks in terrible shape. People raced in, each calling out for instruments and medication, while my husband was carefully ushered away. Then, in a surreal blink, my perspective vanished into darkness. Unbeknownst to me, they had induced a coma and made emergency arrangements for a life flight to another city. I learned later that in the chaos, they'd even drilled directly into my shin bone, something I never realized was possible, to administer vital fluids and drugs. I endured 5 days or so in that induced coma, tethered to a ventilator. During this suspended time, something remarkable occurred. My awareness flickered back, but I was not in the hospital. Instead, I found myself in the passenger seat of my sister's car. She lived in another state and was apparently en route to see me, driving through a late-night downpour. She pulled beneath a gas station canopy, rummaging through her bag to send a quick text. "Hang on, I'm coming for you." Even half lost in that hazy vision, I noticed her mismatched outfit and wrinkled clothes. Once I eventually woke in the hospital, she confirmed every detail, right down to the text. It was my first concrete hint that my perceptions, while comatose, might hold some hidden truths. What followed next was a series of intervals, like waking from a restless sleep. I would snap to, but found myself floating in a pitch-black void. This wasn't the standard variety of darkness you get with closed eyelids. This was total emptiness, where I couldn't measure up versus down, near versus far. My sense of time dissolved. At first, panic smothered me. I writhed, trying to move, only to realize that something invisible pinned my limbs, restricting my breath. It was the textbook nightmare scenario for someone who's claustrophobic. The horror would swell, then I'd drift into what felt like sheer oblivion, only to come back again minutes, or perhaps years, later. Time had no real meaning there. After countless cycles of that terror, I noticed I could shift my position by leaning forward, not at the waist, but perfectly rigid like a plank. That movement was exhilarating, proof I possessed some power in this place. Spotting a faint glow off in the distance, I traveled toward it at incredible speed. praying I wouldn't slam into some invisible barrier. As I neared, it resolved into what seemed like a translucent wall or bubble, and beyond it, shockingly, I could see a hospital room. I recognized the person on the bed as me. My daughter stood quietly, wearing a flannel shirt, which I found curious for that season. I observed her fear, felt her heartache as though it was my own. I tried to reach her, arms extended, but my hands couldn't move past that barrier. Frustrated and desperate, I found myself yanked back into the darkness. Again, I returned, repeating the motion to reach that place of light. The boundary was softer this time, almost pliable, like a soap film. When I touched it, my hands slipped through and I followed. Hovering over my body, I wondered if I could merge back into it by simply lying down. With no instructions to guide me, I tried to will my unconscious form to move, even just a finger. But nothing happened. Anger rose in my chest, and with that, the barrier pulled me away, depositing me back into the void. In the silence of that emptiness, a sudden realization came. I had constructed this isolating prison myself. In life, I had built walls around my heart after the pain of a broken relationship. I'd avoided building new connections, fearing further rejection. The intangible heartbreak I'd carried had transformed into the tangible darkness surrounding me. I felt a seismic shift as a crack of light penetrated that gloom. Hope coursed through my being. Piece by piece, the dark boundary splintered. Just then, an immense radiant presence manifested, a tall, glowing female figure whose warmth filled me with awe. She enveloped me in a gentle embrace without physically touching me, and swirling energies snatched away shards of the crumbling darkness. It was like watching bright wind scatter bits of blackened glass. Only then, gazing into her sparkling green eyes, did I recognize my grandmother. I had been just a child when we lost her, yet here, she felt more alive than ever. She told me, telepathically, but with unmistakable clarity, that death doesn't exist the way we imagine. She referenced a fundamental law of physics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed. That simple truth, she explained, is part of a divine order that we often overlook. Her reassurance made me believe that my essence was not vanishing into the void. It was an indescribable solace. After she soothed me, everything around me became radiantly bright, as if the oppressive darkness had been banished for good. But the tranquility didn't last long. Suddenly, a cosmic jolt rumbled through this realm, as if the entire universe quaked from beginning to end. Something monumental approached, and I recognized that presence as God. There was no glowing silhouette or face, simply an overwhelming sense of power and compassion. In a resonant voice I heard, "I am," and I knew. It was the source of all creation, intimately aware of everything, my triumphs, my faults, even private thoughts I never voiced. A swirl of recollections unspooled before me. First I saw something labeled as good, a vivid memory of the time I helped a stranger pay for groceries. She was choosing which items to return when she came up short, obviously embarrassed. My small gesture of support left her tearfully grateful. Then, like a fast-forward scene, I saw how that small act rippled into the future, prompting her to volunteer in a food pantry and encourage others in need. I felt a remarkable joy at seeing how each single kindness amplifies beyond its initial moment. Then came the bad. I saw a co-worker who I'd silently judged for her lack of compassion at work. I had never openly insulted or gossiped about her, yet heart-level negativity apparently carried a real energetic impact. Worst of all, I learned that her difficult demeanor had roots in severe childhood trauma. I was ashamed that I'd added more burden to her life by harboring unkind thoughts. Our unspoken judgments can harm others, that lesson seemed to say. That revelation rocked me, making me want to rectify how I perceive people around me. God radiated pure acceptance, not condemnation. By focusing only on external behavior, I had missed the deeper reasons behind her struggles. It became clear. The ultimate guide to living might involve searching for the good in others, amplifying it, and letting compassion outweigh self-righteousness. Still overwhelmed by the immensity of love around me, I was asked to open myself fully to that divine presence. Initially, I hesitated, intimidated by the absolute knowledge that God held every detail of my life in perfect clarity. Then a wave of luminous warmth poured into me from the tips of my toes upward, swirling around and healing old wounds, ones I scarcely remembered. It ascended through my core, releasing hidden grief, enabling my voice to sing in a way I never thought possible. The radiance shot beyond my eyelids, merging with the surrounding light, then rushed back in, illuminating the labyrinth of my mind. For an instant, I comprehended everything, universal truths that transcended my old limitations. Although that ultimate knowledge didn't follow me when I returned, I felt it in that transcendent moment. After being saturated with this love, I found myself brimming with questions, particularly about painful moments in my children's lives. "Where were you when they needed a father's support?" I silently demanded. "Where were you when they stood at the mailbox, awaiting letters that never arrived?" My anger burst forth, yet the response was gentle. "You misunderstand me. Let me show you." Suddenly, I saw a future scene in which my eldest grandchild played soccer. He was older than he had been at the time of my medical crisis. My son sat beside me, watching his child dash across the field in the bright afternoon sun. My son turned, telling me he would be the supportive parent he had always wished for himself. It became so clear. The hurts we endure can be forging empathy for the next generation, helping break cycles of abandonment. Recognizing that perspective healed a deep bitterness in me. There was a purpose behind our struggle, attributing meaning to the challenges that had once seemed so senseless. Feeling this sense of resolution, I realized I still had a choice: remain enveloped in that divine light or return to my earthly body to fulfill a purpose I had yet to complete. Reflecting on how I'd shut people out, I recognized that I had not fully embraced the person I was created to be. I felt that if I surrendered now, I would be giving in without discovering the possibilities waiting beyond those self-imposed walls. So I made the decision: I would return. As soon as I settled on that path, the profound closeness I felt with the divine began to fade, not abruptly, but gently. Sadness filled me as the distance grew. The next thing I knew, I was jolted awake in my hospital bed, thoroughly confused, eyes slowly adjusting to fluorescent lights and bustling shapes. A nurse stood by, greeting me with mild surprise. I remember murmuring something about just being in God's presence. She gave a polite nod, quickly calling my family. But although they adored me and had worried for days, my words about being with God felt like abstract chatter to them. When they left me alone, the room quiet and lights lowered, I sensed the divine presence once more. It startled me enough to make me let out a small cry. A gentle laughter echoed from that presence, as if amused by my reaction. This sense of humor, to appear so dramatically, reminded me I wasn't alone. The message was unmistakable. Share this story with others. Let them know they are intentionally created and infinitely loved. As soon as I was stable, I received an invitation to speak publicly about near-death experiences. My first impulse was my usual refusal, crippling anxiety about talking to large groups, especially about something so personal. But the word yes disappeared from my lips before I could stop it. That was the start of a new chapter. Over time, I regained my strength, pieced together the puzzle of my health challenges, and discovered I could manage them without reliving the horror of that night. Undeniably, I was changed, less guarded, more open-hearted. It felt like part of my best practices in healing involved taking those first steps into unfamiliar territory and trusting that a greater design was at work. Looking back, the entire event felt like some cosmic viral hack, spotlighting the significance of uplifting others instead of harboring silent, judgmental thoughts. It also hinted at easy methods to spread kindness, small gestures that ripple forward in ways we might never predict. Whenever I recall the intangible love that surrounded me, I remember that moment of traveling through swirling DNA strands and glimpsing the just barely decipherable code containing something of the divine embedded in me. That revelation remains an anchor, a reminder that each of us carries an imprint of creation, far too precious to waste on isolating ourselves behind walls of fear. For those who yearn for a how-to tutorial about facing loss or heartbreak, and who wrestle with whether life holds a deeper meaning. This experience taught me that authenticity begins with letting go of our defensive barriers. If there's a step-by-step approach to feeling that transcendent connection, it might be as straightforward as practicing genuine compassion, both for ourselves and those we're tempted to judge. It's a behind-the-scenes miracle, realizing that when you silently weigh someone's shortcomings, you're actually adding invisible chains to their journey, and your own. Since then, I've spoken in front of people eager to learn from a near-death perspective. Audiences are often looking for that ultimate guide to understanding what might lie beyond this physical world. For me, the biggest takeaway is trusting love that transcends our human frailties. Yes, there's also the trending now fascination with spiritual revelations and near-death mysteries, but I believe the essence is simpler. By remembering we're crafted on purpose, we can find renewed courage to step into life's unknown chapters. Today, I still reflect on the top 10 strategies for walking through fear or adversity. One strategy is to set aside bitterness and blame, because those can become the building blocks of a personal fortress that only traps you within. Another is to spot the small gestures that can become unstoppable waves of goodwill. It's a best practice to have empathy for others, acknowledging that silent negativity has tangible consequences. Consider easy methods like vulnerability, like owning your pain, and never underestimating the power of a kind word. While my story might sound dramatic, it is, at the core, a human story of heartbreak and hope, of leaving behind illusions of safety to embrace genuine life. I discovered the secret that the human spirit, when opened up, glows more brilliantly than any darkness can contain. Even so, grappling with the memory of that suffocating hallway and the intangible blackness afterwards still stirs up raw emotions. But I've learned to channel them into dialogue that supports others. I'll forever cherish the second chance I received and strive to honor that gift. These days, I continue sharing my journey. Some folks seek a comprehensive tutorial on surviving medical catastrophe. Others want behind-the-scenes insight into crossing the threshold between this life and the unknown. Whether you're looking for the latest trends in medical breakthroughs or reeling from heartbreak, I hope this narrative shines a spark of reassurance. We each carry that light within us, a reflection of something vast and loving. Living on purpose doesn't have to be complicated. The ultimate guide might simply be, let love pave your path, trust that you're not alone, and allow each new day to reveal unconditional grace. If I could compress the entire experience into a single pro tip, it would be this: don't wait until crisis strikes to remember your worth. You are significant right now. We all have the capacity to rise beyond the darkest moments, and maybe, just maybe, to help others do the same.